What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored. They did it.
Slap.
What the hell was that?
Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Hockey Happy Hour. I am Matt Cinsuni, along with the Darkwing, Brian Daly.
What's going on, everybody?
And the Broken One, Rob Povia.
Real quick, I'd like to dedicate tonight's show to the memory of Dale Mooney and offer all of our condolences to his family.
Absolutely. 1,000%.
And Mr. Broadway, Mr. Blue Shirt, Mr. Switzerland, Big Bad Brad Ryer. And we welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, to the Hockey Happy Hour once again on A2DRadio.com, brought to you by none other than Specialized Physical Therapy. If you got any aches and pains, get a hold of the doc, Dr. Paul Vidal. Go on www.specializedphysicaltherapy.com, make an appointment, and you can either go to Burlington or Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and his team of highly trained professionals will make sure you have no more aches and pains, and you get back to doing things you love to do, and also having to go to work. So, let's get to it. So, today on the show, we will be, of course, talking about the Atlantic Division, and we will be talking about the Sunshine State, while we won't be able to do it on location, which is sad. All the same, though, we will get an opportunity to talk about the Florida Panthers, who are the defending Eastern Conference champions this year in very surprising fashion, and the former three-time Stanley Cup finalist and two-time Cup winner, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the last team to repeat as Stanley Cup champions. So with that, we'll dive into our poll question for the evening, which the poll question is brought to you by Baggio's Bread, located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. It has the home of the best sandwiches, tomato pies, stuffed breads, cutlets, and if you mention A2D, you get 10% off your in-store purchase, and you can get yourself some good food, have yourself some great company, and have yourself a great time. All right, then. So, on to our poll question we go, gentlemen, and for today, the poll question is, the Lightning are still the best team in Florida. Agree or disagree? So, gents, now that the Panthers have shocked us all, gone to a Stanley Cup final, and lost to the Vegas Golden Knights, have they trumped the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Let one of you two go first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
And the answer is no. They have not trumped the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay Lightning, this group has won 2 Stanley Cups. Don't forget the third one, Maddie, back in, 2004?
Oh, yeah.
Like
yeah, the first time Tampa went and won.
Yeah, the guy, with Brad Richards and what's his name?
Vinny LeCavier, Martin Saint-Louis, and Nikolai Khabibulin was having an amazing season.
Yep. That was a hell of a team, too. That was coached by my favorite
Tortorella.
And your favorite coach, John Tortorella.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a hell of a team. But they are still the best team in Florida. The Panthers, yes, they had a great playoff run, but when they had to play, a team, when they had to play the Vegas Golden Knights, they crumbled and fell. And, I can't, unless they win the cup, I don't give them credit. Yeah, we're not here to get to the finals. We're here to win championships. When you're talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Tampa Bay Lightning this group has won 2. Okay, they still have a lot of ability. They're very good. I think they just ran out of gas last year. I just think that's really all there was to it. And Toronto finally was able to get through one round, and then they ran out of gas.
Congratulations.
So yeah, so, I mean, it is what it is. I still think Tampa Bay is better than Florida, and I'd still be very worried about them as far as having to play them in the playoffs. I wouldn't want to have to play them. Period.
Yeah. So, I'll go. I will say, agree. I mean, yeah, Florida managed to go on a nice little run for themselves, and I will still hold their victory over Boston very close to my heart because it was so enjoyable to laugh my ass off at them. And in the end, though, I will say that Tampa they've been the dominant team, and they're still the dominant team. Now this year, with Boston now going to be coming down to earth finally, Tampa may very well slide on into the number 1 spot in the Atlantic Division. Is it going to happen as a guarantee? Well, won't jump to that conclusion. But I will say that they've got a better shot than most to be number 1 in the Atlantic before the season is all said and done. So Florida, there's a lot of question marks. They got hot. They rode that wave to the Stanley Cup Finals, and then they lost to Vegas because Vegas said, that's cute. You guys got through everybody in the East. Don't mind if we just, teabag you on our way to our first Stanley Cup, right? And that's pretty much what happened, especially in that last game. Jesus, that score.
That just sounds unpleasant.
It was unpleasant.
It wasn't fun. That game was not fun.
All right. I'll jump in, boys, on this poll. I'm with you. I agree. Despite Florida making it further in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year, Tampa Bay was still the better team during the regular season. You can't ignore that. And it's not like this team hasn't done it in the playoffs. They just, they ran out of gas, to Brad's point. Absolutely agree with you there. Vazzy is the more consistent goaltender over Bob, notwithstanding, his awful performance, against Toronto in the playoff series last year. But if you look up and down their respective rosters, it's hard not to give the edge to the Lightning. The Panthers do have youth on their side, though. I mean, they are nearly, on average, a year and a half younger, but you can't deny the experience of Tampa Bay, especially when it comes to those playoffs. Bottom line, boys, Braden Point is the X factor that puts them over the top.
Yeah,
I can agree to that.
I can definitely agree to that. I mean, Tampa Bay, it's tough to argue against Tampa Bay here. I mean, Florida caught lightning in a bottle last year. They really climbed on the back of Matthew Tkachuk, and he carried that team through pretty much that entire run. Anytime they needed a clutch, big-time goal, Matty T was right there. And, when you're riding a wave like that, it can take you far. But Vegas did absolutely extinguish that flame that they had going. And, I think with Tampa Bay, Rob brings up a great point. There's a ton of experience on this roster. You got guys who have been there multiple times. You have guys who have won it multiple times. You have world-class all-stars on this roster. There's a reason why this team has the second highest salary cap in the league. Just a ton of talent everywhere. And they do have some young talent, but I think the thing you got to look at with this team is the goaltending. We know both teams can score. We know both teams can play defense. The consistency from Vasilevsky outweighs what Sergei Bobrovsky has done. Not taking anything away from Bob. He had a great season last year. But let's be real. When Vazzy needs to win a game, he goes out there and he wins the game. So that's a lot to look at too. And then also another thing to look at this year, going into this year, Florida lost 2 pieces to their defense. Radko Gudas went to Anaheim and Marc Staal went to Philly. So that's 2, whether you believe in their production, that's 2 key pieces moving. You're losing out of your defense. One, you're losing a really hard-hitting defensive player who's going to make you uncomfortable in the opposing zone, and you're losing a voice and a leader in the locker room in Marc Staal. That's going to pay a huge dividend as well moving forward for Florida. So it's hard to not agree with this poll. The Lightning still, despite not getting as far as the Florida Panthers, are still the best team in Florida.
All right, then. So all around, we are going with Tampa. And so that leads us in to our first period. And the first period here is for the Florida Panthers. But before we jump into that, we do have a bit of a sponsor to throw out there, and that is hats.com. In 2018, Eagles legend Brian Dawkins was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And to commemorate this moment, B-Dawk designed and launched an exclusive collaboration with Bowman Hat Company, America's oldest hat maker, on hats.com. Brian's love of hats and the Eagles were on proud display in Canton, and now you could find yourself in that same iconic Hall of Fame fedora. Just go to hats.com, search Brian Dawkins, use the code Philly for 15% off of your order, and look pretty cool while you wear it. So, hats.com, that's where you want to go. All right then, so diving into the Florida Panthers. So, gents, where do you see this breaking down to with Florida? I mean, we know what they did last year. And while that was great, and while that was amazing and impressive for them, and we have to absolutely hats off to them for what they did, here's the thing. They barely even made it into the playoffs. There were times where this team was called out for being a soft team, as they couldn't seem to handle the regular 82 schedule. Pittsburgh took an L when they shouldn't have, and just by sheer dumb luck, the Panthers got the lucky nod off of that. Next thing you know, they're going into the playoffs, and they should have lost to Boston. But then Boston decided to choke away a 3-1 lead. Tampa beat them in 7. Florida beat them in 7. Proceeded then to beat Toronto, although albeit while Toronto won their first playoff series, it's not really that much of an accomplishment. And then you go to the East Finals and you take on Carolina, and you give Carolina another sweep in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's just, we watched another 1996 happen right before our very eyes. So, so gents, give a little history. The following year after that, Florida went to the playoffs. They faced the Rangers in the first round. And Brad, you'll definitely remember this one. The Rangers smoked the Panthers in 1997.
Oh yeah. That was the year they had Gretzky.
Yeah.
I remember that series well, and the change that came in that series was Gretzky scored a goal, and I'm trying to remember who was standing in the crease, and they didn't call it. I think it may have been, was it Robbie Fatorik? I'm trying to remember who it was that was in the crease, and they didn't call it, and Florida just went apeshit. They argued and argued and argued, and it just threw off their whole game. And the Rangers smoked them that game, and then after that, they killed them in the series. So up until that point, the Rangers were in trouble.
Right. So essentially what I'm saying is, after Florida did that unbelievable run, they fizzled out pretty quickly in the playoffs. Yes. Do you see that replaying? Do you see Florida going back to the first round and getting bounced? Do you see them missing it altogether? Or do you see the Panthers actually doing something after this Stanley Cup Finals appearance?
I think they miss. I do. I think they lost a lot this offseason. They do have youth in their favor. They have Barkov. They have Kachuk. They have Reinhart, Bennett, all those guys. For Hagee, who's coming off a massive year. But I think they did lose a lot in Duclair going to San Jose. They lost Gudas, and they lost Staal, like I previously mentioned. They can't seem to keep Aaron Ekblad healthy. Brendan Montour got hurt, who's LTIR candidate. So the defense isn't going to be as good. They did go out and get Oliver Ekman-Larsson on a 1-year deal, which was probably a really good prove-it deal for him to show that he can still play at somewhat of a high level at 32. But ultimately, this is a very different team that you're looking at from last year. I just don't see it. I don't think the defense is as strong. I don't think the offense is going to be nearly as wicked. But, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about the offense. I mean, you never really know. But that offense got off to a slow start last year. But then they really took off. So maybe you see the same thing again. But ultimately, I don't think Florida's as good as they were last year on paper. So I think they miss.
All right, then. So Bry has them missing the playoffs. So, Robbie, do you see Florida missing, or do you see them making it back in?
I do. It's tough to see much cohesion in this group. What is their system? How did these pieces fit? It seems like a bunch of vagabonds put together, and it worked. It worked last year, but then you lost some pieces, to Brian's point. And if your prize off-season acquisition is Oliver Ekman-Larsson, that's a problem. I'm just going to be honest. That's a problem. I mean, are there some pieces here? Sure. Carter Behegi, 40-plus goal scorer, that he could arguably be the face of this franchise, moving forward along with Matthew Tkachuk. They're going to have to be tight defensively. They're going to have to win a lot of, shoot 'em out games. You know what I mean? And hope that Bob can keep you, on the upside in those games. So it's tough to see much consistency enough to make the dance.
Right. And to real quick, to add onto what Robbie's talking about here, you need Spencer Knight to take a step forward too in his development. Sure. He has yet to take that step. And unfortunately, as of right now with this defense in front, I don't necessarily know if I see him making that step. There's a freaking moth in my house and it's distracting me.
The funny part is I actually saw him fly right by you.
I tried to swat him. I missed him.
It was funny. So, Brad, are you going to take a side on this one? Do you feel
I'm going to disagree with both of you guys.
Oh, okay.
I think the Florida Panthers make it, and I disagree with you about the defense. Okay? And it's not because of Oliver Ekman-Larsson, okay? I'm not crazy about him, but Florida more than made up for Gudas. They brought in Nico Mikkola, okay, who was a very tough, rough player, and he was the number 5 defenseman of the New York Rangers last year. He's a left defenseman, and he can play tough just like Gudas, and he doesn't take stupid penalties like Gudas. And by the way, he can skate a lot better than Gudas as well. They also picked up Mike Riley, who I think is a better player than Marc Staal. Marc Staal is a parking code. Okay, he's been a parking code for 3-4 years.
Like I said, he'll fit very well in Philadelphia.
Huh?
He will fit perfectly in the Flyers organization.
I'm sorry. Listen, I love Marc Staal. He was a tough guy when he played for the Rangers. He played through a lot of injuries. Even when he was hurt, he was out there playing. Blocked a lot of shots and really gave his heart and soul to the Rangers. I loved him as a player, but when the Rangers traded him, they had to give up a second-round pick just to get Detroit to take him. Okay, that's how bad he was, and he's not good. I think Mike Riley is better than him. I think that's an upgrade. Okay, now to your point about DeClaire, okay, you got me on that one because they didn't really get another guy who could score, but I don't think scoring is going to be a problem for the Florida Panthers. I do think that their defense might actually be a little better. I'm not sure about the Alex Lyon, Stolarz thing, who's better. They were both your guys, right, at one point?
Yes,
both
they were.
Them, right?
Stolarz was...
is one better than the other? I don't know.
Really, Stolarz only played a handful of games for the Flyers, and the only reason he played a handful of games was that was the year the Flyers started like 50,000 goalies. And... Okay. Lyon actually did pretty well for the Flyers for a period of time. I mean, they desperately needed someone to step up, and he actually played decently when asked to. So, not enough to keep him, forever, but enough to where he stayed hovering around the goaltending for the Flyers for a little while.
I thought he did a pretty good job with the Panthers last year when Bob got hurt. And Florida made that run to get back in the playoff picture. He did do a nice job. He had a couple of big wins, especially the game. I recall the game in Toronto last year towards the end of the season when he went in there and they beat Toronto during the regular season. I think 3-2 in overtime, and he was spectacular in that game.
Yeah, Lyon's a good backup goalie.
Yeah, can
he's
Stolarz actually play that position?
Yeah, Stolarz is a really solid backup. He's just not a starter.
I haven't seen enough of him. That's why I asked. I defer to you guys with that.
He did well out in, what was it, Edmonton, I think he went to, and he did pretty decently out there. But Anaheim, that's where he went to, and he did decently out there in Anaheim.
Okay. Well, in any event, I think as far as the defense is concerned, as I said, I don't give a rat's butt about Larson. I don't know that if he plays well, then that's a bonus for them. But I do think Mikkola and Riley are just fine. I think they're actually an upgrade in the 5th and 6th defenseman department. They will miss Duclair scoring a little bit, but again, they have enough guys that I don't think that it's going to make that much of a difference. Hopefully for them, they can bring up a couple of good young players from the minor leagues who can chip in and replace some of that goal scoring that they lost with him.
Yeah, so I'm not disagreeing with you, Brad, because I agree with you. I think Riley and Mikkola will be good at the 5 and 6 spot. The thing, though, is when does Aaron Ekblad and Brendan Montour come back? That's the only thing in my head.
We don't really know. They're both on long-term injured reserve, are they not?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't know if that means they're not going to be back in the middle of October when the season starts, or if that means they're not going to be back till Christmas. If they're back in Christmas, Florida could, Mike Riley and Nico Mikkola are not going to be solid number 3 and number 4 defensemen. That's for sure. That would be disastrous. As 5 and 6 though, that's pretty good. That's really not bad at all.
Well,
we'll see though. There's no, I haven't heard anything, so I have to assume that those guys will be back probably by Halloween. That's my best guess because I haven't heard anything.
So from what I'm seeing right here, and I'm looking at Cap Friendly right now, I'm hovering over the LTIR candidate. They're saying that they're most likely going to be out for the whole season on IR or LTIR, but I don't know how accurate that is. So in the meantime, I'm going to go look that up.
What did they do to themselves?
Well, that's what I'm going to look up.
How for the whole season? I mean,
Montour. Montour played through the playoffs with an injury? I forget what that was. It was pretty significant.
So did Matthew Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk was playing with, I think, a broken ankle, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Sternum. They actually took him out in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, as I recall. Yeah, that didn't help either.
Well, once they found out that he had a broken sternum, they took him out. They weren't going to. He couldn't move. Once they figured out what was wrong with him.
So let's take a look quick here at some of the fam comments. Pete saying he agrees to the poll. Tampa is still the better team. Bryce, what's up, brother? Saying Florida will be good. He also said that Tampa will bounce back. Very capable of doing so. And Swoopy threw out, he threw out a question, which we could answer now or we could save it for around the league, which regards if the Flyers are interested in Shane Pinto and how good can he become. Is he going to be better than Konechny? And he was being rumored if the Flyers did trade for Pinto. So that's something that has been going around the rumor mill lately, is that the Flyers are getting ready to make a trade with the Ottawa Senators for Konechny to go out to Ottawa.
Where's Ottawa getting all this cap space from?
Ottawa had a lot.
Ottawa's been bad for a while. Usually they have cap space when you've got a bad team. Usually.
I know, but they've been spending their money, though, pretty...
they've been trying to go all in. You're right. Yeah, they've been trying to go all in to get back in. Yeah.
They've been somewhat of a drunk sailor the last couple of years, spending money. I mean, I know it's low. I know they were right around the floor. I mean, they weren't the Coyotes, but they were pretty close. I get that, but they've been. Let's put it this way: they've been pretty active.
All right. So real quick before we jump back into that, so Brandon Montour suffered a shoulder injury. He had surgery. He's going to be out about 4 to 6 months. And then Aaron Ekblad has a list of ailments from the playoffs. So he could be out for some time as well.
Ooh. Do you think that he misses a season, or do you think he doesn't come back till way later in the season?
I didn't see a timetable for him.
Okay.
Shoulder surgery, partial torn oblique,
Oof.
and there was a broken foot.
He might miss the season with all that. So that's a rough one.
Okay. All right. Well, it's still going to be tough. I still think they find a way to get in, though.
Swoopy saying they're trying to get rid of Joseph too, I think. Interesting.
Yeah, but Matthew Joseph. Yeah, that's what I was good. I was looking up a tweet from Anthony DeMarco. It's like they were discussing a deal, and Swoopy brought up Konechny's name, and I was like, I that wouldn't make sense because as far as I know, Shane Pinto is basically not a total wash prospect. Maybe somebody that could start talking into the upper, top 6 level, but certainly not coming to his. I think he was the 32nd overall pick in the 2019 draft, and he hasn't really exactly lived up to that as of yet. So maybe shed his out, like he's a restricted free agent, new scene, can maybe see that talent come to fruition with a rebuilding team in the Flyers, whereas the Senators could get a piece that could help them now. Makes sense, but apparently I guess the Flyers backed out of the deal according to Anthony DeMarco.
Interesting. I mean, I don't blame Danny. If he doesn't feel like the value's there, then why should you go through with it?
What do the Flyers need another center for?
It's a good point, too.
I do like how they're listening to all offers, though. You know what I mean? Talk about an administration that is just 180 degrees in terms of thinking outside the box, opposed to the Chuck Fletcher administration.
Yeah.
Right, which you can. Yeah, you're right. That's something to be accounted for with Danny right now as the GM.
Look at the bright side, guys. At least they're not like talking about trying to bring back Pool Jules Harvey or
Pool Harvey or
everybody seems to be wanting to trade for him, and he just isn't what everybody thinks he's going to be. I don't think he's ever going to be any good.
I'm surprised that he was still with the Edmonton organization after all the years after he had gotten drafted by them, and then it's just like, really, you didn't move on from him?
And they refused to trade him
until this past trade deadline and traded him to Carolina, and now he's sitting in free agency.
That's right.
Nobody wants him.
That's right. You're right. I forgot that he got traded in the trade deadline, but then again, that's because. Honestly, I don't even think Pool Harvey was really the biggest get anyway for Carolina, at least not this year. All right, so we move on to the second period, unless there's anything else we wanted to talk about with the Panthers. Was there anything else?
I did have a quick question for Brad. What defenseman were you talking about that the Panthers picked up that was formerly a New York Ranger?
Nico Nicola.
Nico Nicola. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, Nico Nicola. Yeah, 6'4", 209. That's another big boy.
He's a bruiser. I mean, you guys were making a point about those two defensemen, Staal and Gudas. That I think they upgraded with Mikola's good. I mean, listen, he got off to a terrible start with the Rangers, and I'll be the first one to tell you. I was screaming, what the hell did they get him for? He stinks. But you know what? Once he got with the program and and finally gelled with Braden Schneider, he was solid. I hated to see them have to let him go.
Right. Yeah, 27 years old. I mean, I think that is a great acquisition. I was also looking at this guy. I wasn't sure if it was him or Marc Alscher, but he's actually from the Czech league they picked up. He's age 19, 6'3", 196 pounds.
Yeah, I can't comment on somebody I haven't seen play.
Well, no, I got you, but I'm talking size, and I was looking at two big boys that they had on there. Was that the guy from the Rangers, or was it Mikola? But I mean, that's sort of more for the future. Nico is now in terms of 27
Nico,
should be in his prime.
Nico's a good player. I really like him. I don't think he's a 3 or a second pairing defenseman though. I mean, I like him as a third pairing defenseman to when the other team's third and fourth lines out there, and he can throw some nasty body checks. And he's a pretty good penalty killer because he's got a really good backhand, and he can flip the puck down the ice with the backhand. So those are his strengths. I just, I think in today's NHL, second pairing, they got to score a little bit.
All right.
Do that.
So with that, before we jump into the Lightning, where do you guys see the Panthers ending up? You said they missed Bry. Rob, you said they missed, right?
Yeah, I mean, they acknowledging this more of a defensive presence than, with good goaltending, and they do have the ability to score. They could be in the conversation, but it's just going to be tough battling for those wild cards because you have so many good teams in the Atlantic and so many good teams in the Metro. I just see, if you have a team like the Penguins make the playoffs, it's going to be hard for a team like the Panthers too.
Right. And Tom's saying he agrees to the poll. What's up, Tommy?
Hey, Tommy. And that's kind of where my head's at. I think me and Rob are drinking out of the same Kool-Aid bowl here, but maybe a different cup. I think that the competition is stiffer for them now. And I think they did lose a lot this offseason. They gained a little bit, but they lost a lot. And the timetable on Montour and Ekblad is only going to hurt. So that's kind of where I'm at. And if they were 100% and things were a little bit clearer as far as the division goes, I think they'd be a playoff team. But I think with Detroit taking a step forward, I think with Buffalo taking a step forward, Ottawa potentially taking a step forward, I think the competition is there's just too much competition in this division.
And I will say I think the Panthers do miss. If they are going to make it, they're barely going to make it, and it would have to be where they got a couple of lucky breaks and a couple of teams really fell apart going down the stretch, kind of how they got in this year. So it would be the same way if they're going to get in. So I say Florida misses. Brad, you said they made it, right?
I still think they make it. Even in spite of that, I think they find a way. I think that one thing, when you have a playoff experience like what they had last year, I do think it carries over. Again, they wouldn't have gotten smoked as badly if they had, if Tkachuk wasn't taken out of the series and he was banged up. That definitely hurt them. I mean, I'm not saying they would have won that series, but I think they would have been a lot more competitive.
And they got motivation to get back there.
Yeah, they do.
True.
They do.
All right, then. So with that, that'll end our first period talking about the Florida Panthers. Now we are going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, it'll be time to talk about the other Sunshine State team, the one that's been a little bit more successful, and the Tampa Bay Lightning. So enjoy this, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the Bolts.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Royal Billiards and Recreation, the coolest place for all of your game room and man cave needs. For the last 41 years, this family-owned business has been the premier game room store of the Delaware Valley, stocked with the very best in pool tables and accessories, shuffleboards, card tables, dart supplies, bars, and stools. And you could turn any ordinary room into an extraordinary gaming experience. Oh, and did we mention they have hot tubs too? So stop by Royal Billiard, located at 515 Bethlehem Pike in Colmar, Pennsylvania, or on the web at www.royalbilliard.com for everything fun for your home or office. Okay.
Go right there. Go right
Check
there.
it out. All right. So the Tampa Bay Lightning, speaking of having a nice gaming experience and a nice gaming room, that's exactly what Tampa probably has to go and take a look into, since they have 3 Stanley Cups, and 2 of them have come over the last 6 years. And they've had a few Eastern Conference titles to add to the one they got in 2004, and a few division banners on top of it. So with that being said, and a President's Trophy, but we won't talk about that. So Tampa Bay Last year, they got into the playoffs again, and unfortunately, they lost to Toronto. Toronto got revenge for a couple years ago when Tampa eliminated them in 7. Now, to be fair, inevitably, Toronto was going to win a series. It was going to happen. It just so happened to be against Tampa. So while you can laugh at Tampa a little bit, it's like you lost to Toronto, you're the team they beat to finally win a playoff series. In a way, this might actually turn out to be a benefit for Tampa. They don't have to play a long playoff run like they've had over the last few seasons. Maybe now Tampa could come into the next season, be ready to go. Maybe they have another run in them. I mean, it's not like they're old and getting ready to tap out here. Some of these guys are still pretty young. So maybe they got another cup in them. I know that's probably not what anybody wants to hear, but we might be possibly looking at another chance for them to win a cup. You think they could do that?
I do.
Okay, Robbie.
I do, just solely because of a good point that you make there, where they've been playing a lot of hockey over the past couple of years, and they got a bit of a respite this offseason. Maybe one they didn't want, one they didn't ask for, but they got it. And I think the big benefactor is going to be Andrei Vasilevsky. He was lost in that series. I believe he had an .875 save percentage, and he was getting beat like a rented mule, something you don't see the best goaltender in hockey do very often, or have done to him very often. I think he comes back and has a good strong. He's just too solid of a goaltender to be that way. He will rebound. And then when you have the core here, and it's a core that's just predicated upon the big three, and that big three, Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, and Victor Hedman. As long as you have those three pieces in place, and I talked about earlier when we were talking about the poll, Braden Point being, a great fourth addition to that core. When you have a core four, I believe they can rebound strong and make a big noise in the Atlantic Division.
All right.
It's hard to disagree with that. I mean, yeah, the biggest benefactor is going to be Andrei Vasilevsky. He's the type of goaltender. His work ethic is not going to allow him to fail multiple years in a row. Because we barely sit there and we talk about, and we've talked about this before in the past. He doesn't like losing multiple games in a row. You think he likes losing multiple seasons in a row?
No.
So I think he's going to come back. He's going to have a great year. I think this defense is going to be a little bit better than they were last year. You're not looking at a ton of changes here on the back end. You got Darren Radish, 27 years old. He's coming off of his ELC, and you bring in Hayden Fleury. So that's a little bit of depth there. Calvin DeHaan brings a little bit of experience where you lost Ian Cole. And then you have Zach Bogosian, Victor Hedman, Miguel Sergachev, and Eric Cernak. That's a pretty solid defense there.
Sure.
You don't really change anything up on the offense because there's not really a whole ton to change. Maybe a little bit on the fourth line, but the other name that I want to bring up that Rob didn't, and I actually want to turn this into essentially a core five for the Tampa Bay Lightning here is Brendan Hagel, who signed a big extension in the offseason here. Coming off a solid year, you're looking at he's a future star. He's a 30, 35 goal guy. You're adding him to the mix, and now he's going into what I believe his second full season with the Tampa Bay Lightning. This kid is something. I don't want to say he's special, but this is a really talented middle six player. And you're putting him with guys like Braden Point and Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov. Sky's the limit for this kid. I cannot wait to see how good this kid can get. But Tampa Bay right now is one of my picks for the Eastern Conference Finals. I really think they rebound really, really strong this year. This team hasn't changed much. It's a system that works for all of them. They're absolutely dynamic, and they're going to continue that this year. I think they're going to win the Atlantic Division.
Okay, then. So, Robbie, you have them going back in. and doing real well. And Bri, you've got them winning the Atlantic to add a banner to the several they got up hanging in there. What used to be the St. Pete Times Forum, Amalie, that's what it's called now. It's the Amalie Arena. I'm trying to remember what it was called. Hard to keep track when they change the names every 3 or 4 seasons.
Seriously. It's not even just Tampa Bay. It's the Florida Panthers. They just changed their name too.
Right. All of them change. Every single one of them. So, Brad, what about you? What do you think about Tampa, and how do they rebound after getting eliminated in the first round last year?
Oh, I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs this year. That's good. That team's going to come back mad as hell. Okay, they lost in the Stanley Cup Finals a couple of years ago. Last year, they were clearly out of gas in the playoffs. I mean, that team played a lot of hockey. They were in the finals 3 years in a row. They won 2 Stanley Cups. They went all the way to Game 6 of the finals the following year. Okay, I just think that they ran out of gas last year, plain and simple. I think the extra time off is going to do that team a lot of good. And you know what? That'll that losing in the first round of the playoffs will light a fire under their butts, and I wouldn't want to have to play them in the playoffs. I mean, I don't really care if they finish first, second, third, or fourth in their division. It doesn't matter to me. They're going to make the playoffs, and they are going to be a team that nobody wants to play in the first round. I can tell you that right now. And I also took a look at some of the additions they made. I kind of like I like the fact that they re-signed Jeannot. I think that was a really good, really smart move. I know they lost Patrick Maroon. He's gone, right?
Yeah, traded him to Minnesota.
Yeah, they brought in a couple of tough players. I see that they brought in what's his name, Watson, who is always a big pain in the ass for everybody. So he can definitely take over that role, and Jeannot can obviously take over the fighting role for sure, because he's one of the toughest players in the league. And they brought in Tyler Mott also to help on the fourth line, and Glenn Denning. So they did bring in some guys to help out. We'll see if they make the team. But other than that, I mean, this team is a very solid hockey team. From top to bottom, they can score, they can defend. I mean, you still have Victor Hedman. He anchors the defense. Kucherov on offensively with points, and Stamkos. I mean, that's as good a line as you're going to find in the NHL right now. And they're going to be hell to deal with. And you know that they're going to be an angry team. At least I would think they would be, as well as a prideful team for losing in the first round last year. I would list them if I was Vegas and I was listing favorites. They would be either a favorite or a co-favorite to be in the finals next year.
So,
all right. So I got a message to send out to Bruins Pooh Bear. Stick to eating honey, my friend, and I'll stick to doing the good stuff.
Yes, so that is in response to Pooh Bear saying that Tampa ain't going to the conference finals and that Brian's on crack. So,
a Bruin fan.
Only the good stuff.
Okay, so you're going to make the playoffs this year, right? Okay. Brad Marchand is going to be your captain. Yeah, that's a fine example for a captain.
Meanwhile,
when he gets the first time he loses his temper and tries to punch a goalie in the face and gets suspended for 10 games. Yeah, that's a good example of a captain right there.
I can't blame a guy for hating, though. That's kind of their rival these days, right?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
True.
Pretty much.
True, but he's...
Yeah.
When it comes to controlling the Atlantic, it's been between those two teams for a good 7 years now.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys,
too many players. They're done.
Yeah, but you know what? The thing I love about all these cats that come in from YouTube, they all sit there and just rip on each other, and I'm pretty sure they all know each other. And I absolutely love every bit of it.
Yeah.
These guys make this show that much more fun.
They do.
They sure do.
And Canucks Dork saying, is it time to burn Vancouver? I mean, build igloos and wish for a cup? Both. It is time for both of them since hockey season's on the horizon. And for Flyers fan 95, he's saying, go to the zoo, Pooh Bear. And Penguins guy Crosby saying, wait, bears aren't allowed in my zoo.
Very good.
Great.
You go back to the 100-acre word, Pooh Bear.
Meanwhile, Goathead Saber saying Devil Sabres conference final. So he really believes that his Sabres will go on quite a run and they'll meet up with the Devils, which will be a tall task for a Sabres team to go up against them.
I don't know about the Sabres going quite that far, but the Sabres are going to be a team to be reckoned with this year. I do agree with that, but again, going into the playoffs the first time, I don't know. That's a tall ask.
It is.
Just ask the Devils what happened. They got out of the first round, and ask them what happened in the second round.
Right. So with that, for you, Brad, for Midwest Ranger Yeehaw,
my man.
He's so excited he took his headphones out. He was so excited he threw his headphones off.
Brad, smash.
Yes, finally, a Rangers fan.
Finally, a Rangers fan.
Oh, okay. So
That hurt my ear.
that's why you're not supposed to rip those out.
I did it again.
Oh, so guys. So guys, with that, Tampa, I'll say, I see Tampa. I think they win their division, and I think they get into the playoffs. Will they go back to the conference final? That is very possible. You know what? I'm just going to say it right now. Watch them go back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Watch Vazzy say, you know what? I'm rusted. I'm winning another one, because he can do that. The man literally can do that. He could say, yeah, I'm winning another one, and we're just all going to have to bow and deal with it. It's as simple as that. He'll watch Tampa go back to the finals and represent the East to play whomever's coming out of the West.
he comes packing the force field cheat code. Yep.
That is exactly what he does. And then even if the West team comes in with the big heads cheat code, that ain't going to do anything. It's just going to make them look even goofier. So with that, we move on to the third period. And our third period sponsor is, if you are looking to buy or sell a home, or you have a change in career in brokerage, contact Alan Foy at eXp Realty and eXp Realty LLC, and call him up at 302-682-8820, or visit him at alan.foy at exprealty.com. So that way you can make sure you have everything you need and you're good to go when it comes to making that big step in life. So, and for everyone who's out there in the fan throwing out the comments, we love you guys. Thank you very much. You are the lifeblood as always. You are brought to you by Gleason's Bar, located 6700 Mill Creek Ave in Levittown, PA. Use the promo code A2D for 10% off your order whenever you dine in, take out, or you go online at gleasonsbarandsteaks.com. Okay, so third period time, gentlemen. Let's talk about a couple of the big things going on around the league. And one of the big ones is Mike Babcock. So Mike Babcock resigned as the Columbus Blue Jackets coach before he even really had a chance to get behind the bench during the regular season. But there's a reason for that. Apparently, he was kind of abusive to his players. I say kind of. But really, apparently, he was very abusive to his players. So much so that they got very upset. And, they shared some of the info that's been happening in Columbus. And this eventually got leaked out to the public. And with this scandal, Mike Babcock resigns. So now, do you think that this was, I don't think that Columbus would have done well with Mike Babcock anyway. So the question that I have to ask is, what was the point of all this? You know, you go out and you get Babcock. I understand that he had a reputation, but he had both good and bad reputation. There was a lot of controversy even when he left Toronto. So I feel like this was kind of inevitable, but I feel like this was also kind of stupid for Columbus to even have tried this in the first place. How do you guys feel about all this?
It just seems like he was hired on such thin ice, right? So he had this history of being abusive to his players and not connecting with today's modern day player. You know, for good or for bad, you could say the pussification of America and Canada in this case. You know, that you can't be tough on your players or what have you, and that all of a sudden you come to a new place and you're doing player interviews, and a part of his way to relate with his players is, let me see your cell phone. I just want to look through your pictures on your phone, you know, as a way to connect. And some players had not a problem with that, and other players had a big problem with that and didn't want to fork over their phone. To me, that didn't really seem like an entirely too big of a deal. And then these players, instead of going to their GM, going to their president, going over the head of the coach, I guess maybe trying to be respectful of the new hire, goes to Paul Bissonnette so he can leak it on Spit and Chicklets. It's a very messy situation on both sides, right? And he had such a short leash that it was like they wanted to distance themselves, and they came out and they said, we own it. We made a mistake with the hire. We're moving on. And they brought in it was the assistant head coach that now becomes the head coach. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, I forget his name, but he's going to take over as an interim head coach for the situation. And this is a touchy situation because a lot of players, especially players nowadays, you know, they don't want to be the one who, you know, rats out the coach for doing something that may or may not make him uncomfortable these days. Just because it's supposed to be how hockey is, and you know, you're supposed to be tough and whatever, mentally tough, physically tough, whatever. This is a situation that can make a lot of guys uncomfortable, and a lot of guys uncomfortable with the coach, and that makes for really a toxic locker room.
Yeah.
Johnny Gaudreau has said in an interview that he was fine with it, whatever, and I'm sure some players are. Boone Jenner came out and said the same thing, you know. But these are the two guys that you're expected to have in Columbus for a long time. Johnny just signed his lucrative deal a year or two ago. Boone Jenner wears the C for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So you expect these guys to step up and kind of just be like, yeah, it's fine. I don't have a problem with it. It is what it is. You know, he's trying to relate to us, da 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 da. But this is a guy who has a reputation of being mentally and physically abusive to his players. Johan Franzen is another player who's unfortunately had to deal with that while battling depression, while battling some other things going on. And Franzen, his career was never the same after Babcock. So this is a guy who's always been there in ears, telling guys this, that, and the other. I don't know what's being said, what's not being said, so I'm not even going to go ahead and speculate. But, you know, with all these stories coming out from guys like Chris Chelios and Paul Bissonnette, Ryan Whitney from Spit and Chicklets, and who's the other one? Mike Commodore. It's really kind of hard for having multiple sources. Even Derek Settlemeyer from the Philadelphia Flyers, who was a former trainer for the Flyers, even had some not so pleasant stories of Mike Babcock. Hard to really kind of put all that aside and sit here and try and defend that.
Right.
As much as I kind of tried to see the other side of it because of how things are today. Because, Rob, you hit the nail on the head. It's hard to relate to players when you're an old school boys club style of coach. But I also think that this is the league that's trying to get those guys out.
Right.
And unfortunately, this is how they're going to do it.
Right. I will say this now. Babcock was on thin ice. Well, now GM Jarmo Kekalainen and John Davidson now are on thin ice.
Yeah. Yeah, they came right out and apologized for the hiring. They said it was against we didn't go against we went against our better judgment with it. And it's a hiring that they probably never should have done, knowing his reputation. And it's unfortunate because you know what? He is a good coach.
And
It's
he
hard
won
to
some
take that
cups,
away
too,
from
and
him.
won some cups in Detroit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been the
But Detroit's a
multiple.
long time ago.
2008, right? 2008 Cup with Detroit and 2 gold medals with Team Canada. Like he is a successful.
But that's 14 years ago. That's a long time in hockey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but again, think about it. This is a guy who was essentially, I don't want to say blacklisted, but he wasn't looked at to be a coach in the NHL for 4 years.
Right.
There's a reason for that.
Right.
Most guys his age start mellowing out. I mean, I'll give a good example. Your coach, Tortorella.
Yeah,
okay, Tortorella at one time was an absolute maniac. Okay, compared to what he used to be, he is very, very much the mellow John Tortorella. Okay, you'll see him when he gets pissed off behind the bench. Then he goes back into his, and then it becomes the Wolfman again. But he's a lot. What's the word I'm looking for? He's a lot more calm, cool, and collected than he used to be. I'm just surprised that Babcock, hasn't mellowed out a little bit. After all the time he spent not coaching, you would think that he'd go in there and try to be just a little bit more friendly, non-evasive.
Well, the thing is
not
that,
in your face so much, because nobody likes that anymore. That's totally not. That's not how you coach men anymore.
well, here's the thing. Some coaches never really change. They never adapt to the times. Feels like Mike Babcock's that guy. He's one guy who's like, he's good for that one era, and he couldn't coach in another. There are many coaches throughout NHL history. It's like they probably wouldn't succeed in this era of hockey. Good example, 90s. Pat Burns would not succeed in this era because he was a yeller. He was a screamer. Mike Keenan would not succeed.
Keenan would not succeed.
Not in this NHL. No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
that's the thing, though, Matty, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because successful coach in the NHL, borderline Hall of Fame coach, if you want to call him that. He spent the era doing things his way because that's how the era was. They could take it. Spent 4 years away from the game. Try to adjust. Try to do exactly what you're talking about. Try to adjust. Try to relate to the players today, and it still damned him because they saw him as, and Brad used the perfect word for it, they saw him as invasive because of the things that he was trying to find out from his players. It's not like he was sitting there trying to, hey, let me see, pictures of your girl. Let me see this, da. He was asking them questions. He'd interview them. He'd ask them questions about his family. He'd show off pictures of his family, and then they would talk about hockey. So it's not like he wasn't trying to make the change. I think that he tried to do it in a new age way. He just failed miserably at it. Trying to his relationship to the players. I mean,
well, and that's the thing. Like, it also depends on the environment too, where the players are. Okay, how has the team treated the players? How have they? The younger players who are just coming in, it's a different story with them. For players who may be 1 or 2 years in the league, how have they been treated? And they're used to getting treated a certain way. When a new coach comes in and tries to do something different, like you were saying, Bryce, some don't take that very well. And even if they've only been in the league for a couple of years, veterans on the opposite hand, they don't have to care. And they don't care sometimes. There's like the new coach, whatever. Some don't. Others do care, and they do have that heart, that passion to make change. Some have already made their money, and they're just like, I'm just here to collect my paycheck. I don't care anymore. They've mentally checked out. I like to think not many of those veterans exist anymore, but sadly, I think there are still a few hanging around the NHL locker rooms. They're like, I just don't care. I made my money. I don't give a shit what you ask for. And then
a lot more than you might think.
Right. Sadly, that does happen. And that happens in all sports. That's not just hockey. But, the point is that I think it's a lot of, you're walking into an environment where maybe a team has treated kids a certain way. Some of them kids, some of them are adults, young adults that are used to kind of a coach being a different way with them. And they just do not like the change. And so in a way they'll say like, nah, I don't like this coach. And unfortunately, that does have a lot to do with it because of social media and the accessibility you have now, which you didn't have back when Mike Babcock was just starting to coach. I mean, hell, back when he was just starting to coach, you were lucky if you could get AOL to fire up. And if you tried to download a picture, good luck. That's all day. So, I mean, it was very primitive back then compared to what it is now. It's like now instant. You could say like, yeah, my coach farted and I don't like the smell. So, like that's literally what you can do. And in a way, it gives the players a huge advantage over their coach. It kind of does. I'm not saying players do it. I'm just saying that it's something that's different now that coaches, I think, have a hard time. Some coaches have a hard time adapting to as compared to back in the day where that wasn't an option.
I think it was more than that, though. I think it was more than just the pictures. It had to be. Couldn't be just that.
Well, it was probably also the stories and the history that he had.
If they had some fucking naked pictures of their girlfriends, man, maybe he didn't want to fork it over some creepy old looking dude. I don't blame him.
Right.
I don't blame him.
Yeah,
but then again, why aren't you creating like a locked folder on your phone? Come on, smarten up. Come on.
Yeah, but these guys are hockey players. They're not. We're not talking about brain surgeons.
Yeah, but a lot of guys they don't want to show up. They don't want to talk about stuff like that. They want to show up, play hockey, and go home.
Yeah, it's none of his business.
You're right. It's none of his business. That's absolutely right, and that's the problem.
Yeah, he's getting way too personal. Nobody wants. I mean, somebody asked me to see my pictures on my phone. I probably wouldn't care, but you know what? If I had stuff that's in there that's very, very private, I wouldn't be forking it over either to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100%. And this is why it became such a situation is because of, his past, and it made some guys uncomfortable because it's, I mean, me personally, I wouldn't care either because I don't really have anything bad in my phone for you to look at anyway. But like, you can sit there and ask me questions about my family, my friends, my life, my hockey style, like anything like that, all you want. But when you ask me for my phone and you want to look through my pictures, that sends a red flag to me.
Yeah, like he's a weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like he was looking for something.
Yeah.
Be funny if you asked me. I have like 6. And none of them are interesting. Be like, yeah, I took a picture of that because I was bored one day.
One of them's a blurred shot when you were trying to put your phone back in your pocket, right?
Right. Be like,
picture of your shoes.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, coach, listen.
Yeah. This is a couple of them.
It's like, coach, listen, I'm not on social media. You got nothing to worry about with me. Anyway, so that'll take care of that for Mike Babcock. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy surrounding that. I'm sure we haven't heard the last of all this. When, like you were saying, Rob, with the GM and everything, we might still just be at the beginning of this whole thing. So with that, before we get to the wrap-up signal, boys, we wanted to be Morgan Frost, talk about the deal with what he's got going on. What was the length again? I forget. Was it 3 years? 2 years.
2 years.
2.1
per year, I believe.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which is a relief. Morgan Frost, needed player. Would like to see him continue here in an orange and black jersey. Would like to see him take the next step. Definitely this year. Yes.
Prove it.
Mm-hmm.
But here's your
that was a fair contract.
Absolutely.
Yep. It is. It's a prove it deal. It's like, all right, show us you're worth it. And we'll talk about this again. So hopefully it'll work out for him. All right. So it's on to our OT, brought to you by Alonzi Travel. If you are planning any vacations coming up or any big trips, Alonzi Travel, they specialize in creating the vacation of your dreams, whether it's to Disney, Universal, or wherever your heart calls to. Let their talented team of travel experts create the custom vacation for you without any stress. Tell them that A2D sent you, and Also, if you want to go online, go to www.alonzitravel.com/take-the-trip in order for you to book it and get it ready to go. All you got to do is catch your flight then. And make sure you get a hold of Ritz and Chucks because they're the ones to go to for that. Okay, so shootout time for us, gentlemen. And as we've kept up the theme, we will be going to our all-time Lightning and Panthers players. So we'll start off with the Panthers. And who wants to throw out their top 5 for the Cats out there in Sunrise?
I'll go real
that.
All right, go ahead, Brad.
You can go, Brian.
No, you go.
All right.
So polite.
All right. I think
polite
the
on this
greatest.
show.
I think the greatest player that they ever had was Luongo. I mean, maybe I'm crazy to think that because he didn't win a Stanley Cup or anything, but and Van Beesbroek did get them to the finals. But Luongo is probably the best player they ever had, so I would have to rank him as number 1. Barkov is probably the best scorer they've ever had, so he'd be number 2. Can I say Pavel Bure, or do I have to consider him a Canuck?
No, I got him on my list.
He had what, 350 goal seasons with them?
Yeah, he still has their single season record too at 59.
Yeah, so I mean, just because he was so good, I have to put him in there. Jonathan Huberdeau has to be considered one of them, so I put him number 4. And Aaron Ekblad, who I think is the best defenseman they've had there. Unfortunately, he's hurt again, but he's number 5. And a honorable mention to Mr. Tkachuk for what he did last year in getting them into the playoffs and getting them all the way to the finals. And unfortunately, it ended for him because he got hurt, and I think that ended it for the any kind of a way of competing against those Las Vegas boys. They were just too good.
Joe's saying best Lightning, Ruslan Fedotenko, best Panther, Claude Giroux, fuck everyone else, go Flyers.
Yeah, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
Like a style.
So I'll go number 5 for me. For the Panthers, Rob Niedermeyer. Number 4, Scott Mellenby. Number 3, Jay Bouwmeester. And number 2, I will throw out. I decided I'll throw out. You know what? I'll go with Luongo. Luongo, could have been something in Florida, but they traded him to Vancouver. And then number 1. Number 1 for me, John Van Beesbroek. Took him all the way to the final. He deserves it.
How? Okay. No judgment, but so far I don't like what I'm hearing because there's one player neither one of you guys have mentioned yet, and I'm hoping he's on Robbie's list. So Robbie, you go first because I'm gonna give it a little suspense here.
All right, number 5, I got Scott Mellenby too, the inventor of the rat trick. I had to pick between Luongo and Van Beesbroek, and I figured I'd save Luongo for Vancouver, and I'll go Van Beesbroek here as their top goaltender. Argument could be made for Luongo for sure. 3, Pavel Bure. 2, Jonathan Huberdeau, now Calgary Flame. But their number 1 of all time is currently on the roster, and that's Alexander Barkov. Tremendous leader. I have an honorable mention too. Carter Behege will one day be on the top of all of this list.
I love you guys. I do. But God damn it, you missed him too.
I figured I did.
Oh! All right.
Trying to figure out who he's talking about here.
How do you forget about Ed Jovanovski?
Oh, yeah. Big Ed.
Come on.
Steady Eddie.
Steady Eddie. Come on.
You know what? In
the
heat of the moment, I panicked and I thought, wait a minute, was Jovanovski on the Panthers? And then I realized, shit, he was.
Very long time.
And I went with Bouwmeester instead.
I for some reason, I considered him a Coyote. I don't know why.
Well, because he
He
was a
spent
Coyote.
a long time there, too.
Yeah.
He spent a long time in Florida and a long time in Phoenix. I think that was the only 2 teams he ever played for.
Poor guy.
Yeah, I seem to remember him more with Phoenix than I do with Florida, but he was a good player. You're right.
Yeah,
I think
started.
Jovanovski was on the decent years for Phoenix, so that's why you might remember him a little bit more there.
Okay.
But it's as far as the rest of my list goes, it's pretty much the same as you guys. So it's Ed Jovanovski, Scott Mellenby, Pavel Bure. I'm going to put John Van Beesbrook at number 2 and Alexander Barkov at number 1. It was tough to keep Huberto off the list, but
Mean Metal Mike
somebody had
said
to go.
Mean Metal Mike said Yager, Bobrovsky, Van Beesbrook, Luongo, and Bouwmeester. He was going all Flyers until he got to Luongo and Bouwmeester.
Bouwmeester was a really good player.
He was. He was.
He was a really good defenseman. I always liked him.
It's just a shame how his career ended.
Yeah.
So to the top 5 we go for Tampa. And who wants to start up for the Bolts?
I'll go first.
All right.
Obviously, number 1, it's going to be Steve Stamkos. Just it's just not even a conversation. So you're going to go Stammer. For me, it's Vinny Lecavalier at 2, Martin St. Louis at 3. Then we're going to put Victor Hedman at 4, and it's got to be Andre Vasilevsky at 5. Like it's not even a competition or a conversation.
All right, then. Brad, why don't you go? Give your 5.
Okay. Unfortunately, I left St. Louis off the list. Sorry about that. But I have Stamkos, Lafreniere, Kucherov, Hedman, and Vasilevsky. And as far as my honorable mention point, and Marty St. Louis, that they are honorable mentions. I didn't have them in my top 5.
All right, then. And as for me on the 5, I will say at number 5, Martin St. Louis. Number 4, Victor Hedman. Number 3, Vinny Lecavalier. Number 2, I throw Andre Vasilevsky. And number 1, Stamkos.
Sweet. Yeah, it's same list, different order. 5, Vasilevsky. 4, Kucherov, Hedman, St. Louis, Stamkos. But just 4 out of those 5 are on the current roster. That's amazing.
It is. It really is. But when you repeat as champs and you go to 3 finals, there's something to it.
Well, you could have mentioned Brad Richards too. He was a great player when they went in the 2004 team.
He would definitely be my honorable mention. And that's me, Metal Mike, St. Louis, Hedman, Vazzy, Stamkos, and Vinny Lecavalier. All right.
Real quick before we sign off, I want to give a congratulations shout out to Braden Shen, named captain of the St. Louis Blues earlier this afternoon. So congratulations to the former Flyer.
Former Flyer, now captain of the Blues. Congratulations, man. Good luck to you. See if the Blues can get back to the playoffs this year. All right, then. So that'll do it for this edition of the Hockey Happy Hour. Birds of a Feather is coming up next. The Eagles now have 2 wins under their belt after beating the Vikings on Thursday Night Football last week. So we'll see if they can build off of that momentum moving forward. They'll let you know all about it. Until then, we will continue our journey through the divisions, and I do believe we have one more to go, and that's the Central, right?
We still got to do the Canada teams in the Atlantic.
Oh, that's right. It's the Canadian teams. That's what it was. So we'll go back up north of the border to go discuss Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal.
Good
Until
luck coming up
then,
with guys on Montreal. That's going to be a tough one. They just have so many. My God.
Yeah. They only have 24 cups in 100 plus years of great teams.
We may want to do 10 for Montreal because
right. Break the rule.
Yeah.
All right.
Just because we don't want to embarrass ourselves by missing like 3 Hall of Famers or something like that,
3 try 30.
Yeah,
So, all right, guys, we will see you next week. We're brought to you by Specialized Physical Therapy, the Dr. Paul Vidal, and we will see you guys next week right here on A2DRadio.com. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace and love, everybody.